on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Freefall. I'm Bernie Suarez, and I'm here with Andy Steele, coming to you on shortwave radio, courtesy WWCR. Hi, everybody, and welcome to 9/11 Freefall. This is a program which is primarily committed to the scientific evidence surrounding the events of September 11th. We are committed to exposing the official story narrative that we believe is not true, and we are committed to bringing attention to an organization called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the pursuit of academic truth with respect to the events of 9/11. Andy Steele, welcome to the show. Another day, another week with 9/11 Freefall. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We keep on coming back, and the reason is that there's a lot going on in the world right now, very important events taking place, but we keep it grounded on the science of 9/11 because that is really what brings it back and what pulls the rug out from under everything right now.
Absolutely. That's what this show is all about. As Andy just said, we are going to stick to it. We do branch out to a few other issues. Very, very few things are as predictable and reliable as science and the scientific method. If we throw that out, there's pretty much nothing left. It's just a bunch of people making claims for their own personal political gain and whatever have you. So that is the reason why we stick to the science, and we focus this show on that science and other things that confirm the science, whether it's testimonies and other just news events and headlines and whatnot. In terms of architects and engineers, I know we got a few things going on over there, don't we?
Yes, we do. I guess the first thing we're going to talk about, we talked about it a little last week, is our great volunteers, Rena Patty, is journeying for truth across the United States. And I'm going to ask the audience right now to go to a webpage. It's 911journeyfortruth.org. I'm going to repeat that again. That's 911journeyfortruth.org. And if you go to that site, you're going to see it's a basic description of what's going on right now as our volunteers are biking across the country. And I can't imagine the dedication and I can imagine the dedication, but the energy and effort being put into something like this. That is a truly bold statement to be making for the scientific truth of 9/11.
Absolutely, and maybe we'll get lucky enough to be able to get Rena Patty or Pamela Senji on here, the two ladies that are doing this journey for truth. I'm inspired by this. I went to the site here, and there it is. The first words right there. It says, "We dedicate our journey to those who died and who suffered loss on 9/11, it says here, and to all who have died and suffered loss on account of 9/11. There's a button there on the right that says, signed a 9/11 family member petition. So, you haven't signed that petition and you haven't been a part of Architects and Engineers yet, here's another petition that our audience can click on and be part of this 9/11 family member petition. And there's a lot of action going on. There's a petition circulating, I know, for that's been generated, I believe is on change.org, I believe, and here it is. And it's petition, I'm kind of going through this. It's a petition for families to petition President Obama to, and it reads, President Obama, 9/11 families ask you to watch 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out. And that's the film, Andy, you and I have been talking about for some time now. This tour with Rena Patty and Pamela Senji, this 9/11 Journey for Truth, it comes at the heels of the other tour, which is the Experts Speak Out tour that concluded a few weeks ago, which, of course, Richard Gage went across the country bringing the evidence of 9/11 truth and science to the people in different facilities, and we got the word out there.
Exactly. And, I want to just to bring this to everybody's attention about 9/11 or Journey for Truth and what you're talking about. This is a perfect example of what I've talked about in previous weeks, about how everybody's got talents, everybody's got something to bring to the table. And a lot of times when you talk about standing up for 9/11 truth. People get this image in their head that they need to stand out in the street with one of those the black T-shirts and protest. But protest doesn't necessarily mean demonstrations if that's not your thing. And this is a perfect example of somebody using their talents, coming up with a great idea that brings attention to this topic. And it doesn't just have to be a bike ride. It doesn't have to just be writing on a blog. It can be, art. Yeah, and you've got your own website where you talk about art and truth and all of that, Bernie. It can be something as simple as that. It can be making a song, as I've seen people do. This is why we learn to be creative, or in school, or at least we used to. A lot of that might be getting phased out now in modern times. But this is why it's important to be creative, because you can use that creativity for important issues just like this. Because if it's just people out in the street protesting, if it's just people talking about it and rehashing it, then people sometimes will turn it off. It's coming up with new ideas like this that keeps the issue alive and keeps people coming back to it and exploring it further.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I'm motivated by this website, and we encourage people to check it out. Again, that's 911journeyfortruth.org, and you can actually keep track of the blogs, Rena's blogs and Pam's blog, and they'll update the world on what's going on whenever they have a chance to update it. And so that's always good. It's always good to see that. I want to read, what the site stands for and the effort and the journey. It says here on the website, we stand for, one, it says, honest and open public discourse about the destruction of the World Trade Center buildings on 9/11 based on the scientific facts and forensic evidence. There's that word again. We talked a lot about those two factors right there the last few weeks. And then it goes on. It also stands for integrity and courage to follow the facts wherever they lead without any agenda there. I added that little part there at the end. It goes on. Freedom of speech and assembly for redress of grievance regarding the need for a new independent investigation with subpoena power of 9/11 and subsequent wars, violations of international treaties, and loss of civil liberties. Then it goes on. We stand for freedom of the press to cover international calls for a new investigation of 9/11. And finally, it says we stand for respect and compassion for all people, no exceptions.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great statement, and it's very true. And it goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning about how 9/11 serves as the linchpin to a lot of these issues that we care about. She addressed there the loss of civil liberties, about treating people, good or kindly across the world. Well, all of that began, and there were things going on before 9/11 too. But in our modern times, all of that began with this event. And now, when you learn the truth about it, it pulls, I can't say it enough. It pulls the rug out from under us. And this is why AE 9/11 Truth's information is so important.
And we talked about the disconnect. We talked a little bit back in July 4th, and the disconnect with a lot of America's youth with these perpetual wars that go on and on and on. And that disconnect with respect to the purpose of the wars, what's really happening, and connecting it with 9/11, human suffrage, as well as these invasions, torture, and on that has resulted as a result subsequent to the 9/11 crimes. The site also, obviously is reaching out to everyone. They are looking to get the experts speak out to the public's attention. Newspapers and radio stations are encouraging people to Facebook this link and blog about it. Get the word out. This is what it's all about. And they do have links here directly to architects and engineers. And there's a reminder that anyone listening to this program can sponsor and support Rena and Pam on this 9/11 Truth, this journey for truth. And then there's buttons there for donating and that kind of support. And anyway, so well, good luck to the ladies. Hopefully we can get one of them or both of them on. Hopefully one of these weeks. We'll definitely be talking a lot about this journey, which I believe is expected to be 3 months long. Boy, and those ladies, I'm sure they're going to be in very, very good shape. It says here they're expecting to cover some 52 miles a day or whatever it is. But that sounds pretty exciting and crazy there.
It sounds like a pretty exciting adventure story. I don't know, Bernie. You think we would be up for something something like that? I might have to get in a little bit more shape or something.
Well, I was riding about 10 miles a day not too long ago in one of my jobs, but so maybe I may be ready for the warm-up period. So it is something to consider. Maybe someone else will get out there. Maybe we will, and we'll do the show from the road or something. We'll see. You know, you talked about being creative and all that. This is definitely an opportunity. So go ahead, ladies. Good luck with that, and we are very proud of them, and they are active in a lot of other ways. This is just one way that they have chosen to take their activism for 9/11 Truth. So, all right. Well, that was just one issue we wanted to throw out there. Last week we talked about, and we have other things to talk about. We'll see until we run out of time today. Right? We'll see how we do. Last week we had David Chandler on, an incredible gentleman. This gentleman is a professor of physics, and he's got all these degrees in math and physics and all that. And he's an educator, and he's got his YouTube channel, the David Chandler channel. Is it David Chandler 911? Want to confirm that here, and we'll David Chandler 911. It is, and people can go on that site on his YouTube channel and see the work that he's done. He's gone right after the NIST hoax, I call it, and gone right after there. We talked about last week on the Piledriver Theory and Newton's laws and these kinds of issues. He's done a lot of work. There's some papers he's written that people can go on his site and check that out. So I don't have his site here. Where's his site? We talked about it last week, but we'll get that for you before the end of the show. And you can check out his work. And that his work has made a big difference in the 9/11 Truth movement. And there it is. It's at 911speakout.org. There you go. 911speakout.org. So, although I have a lot of papers in front of me, and I consider myself somewhat organized, not always. Sometimes it takes me a few extra minutes to find something. So, we talked a little bit about some of the channels. We encourage people to go ahead and go to Physics and Reason. That's John Cole's YouTube channel, and we were talking about this before the show. I'm about 99% sure that's John Cole's channel. So maybe it's someone who's really close to him who decided to put all of John Cole's video on one YouTube channel. So we are trying to get John Cole on the show, and hopefully we can get him on and he'll clarify everything. But all his experiments are on that channel. And we encourage people to go there in addition to David Chandler's channel. Well, what else? We talked about Newton's laws and the application of Newton's laws. We talked a little bit about scientific dictatorship, and I guess people that are out there sabotaging the scientific method and all that.
And I want to make a point on that. We talk about the Piledriver Theory, and my joking reference to the Piledriver Theory is usually, I grew up watching here in Piledriver. I see somebody on TV in a mock combat dropping another person on their head. Well, in a kind of metaphorical way, that's what the NIST is doing to the American public and to science in itself. It's putting it upside down and dropping it on its head with the Piledriver Theory, with the way that it defies Newton's laws, And so we're here exposing that every week, but this is why you need to check out channels like John Cole's channel, like David Chandler's channel.
And we're going to talk a little more about them. But one of the things we want to do, we do this every week, we're going to go ahead and take 10 seconds of silence, approximately 10 seconds, to remember the victims of 9/11 and, of course, the families who suffered as a result of the loss. So with that, 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims. All right, so we were talking, back to our conversation, Andy. We were talking about the Piledriver Theory, and obviously we had David Chandler here last week, and he gave us as much information, kind of about David Chandler, and we didn't really get a chance to talk about sort of like a post-interview chat on David Chandler, and I'm sure hopefully we can get him back on in the future to talk some more about what he's doing. I found it striking that the thing that kind of did it for him ultimately was a physics issue. He's watching the collapse of the building and the destruction of the towers, and he notices these ejections flying out of these windows at over 60 miles an hour, which is much, much faster and a lot more force than anything going vertically. And that promptly as a experienced professor of physics, that caught his eye, and that led him to do some more research. And I guess he was influenced by Jim Hoffman website and all that. But it's just amazing to see how everyone has a different story.
Sure, and to explain this to the audience, just even in more simpler terms, or to give one of my famous analogies here, if you walked into your kitchen and you saw there was a spoon on the edge and it fell on the floor, but it was like generally right underneath the table, you'd say, okay, the spoon fell off the table. If you walked into your kitchen and you saw the spoon shoot across the room and hit the wall, you would say, well, I don't know what you would say. You'd say I've got a ghost or something in here, because it wouldn't be a regular gravitational fall. Something would have caused that to shoot out. Mm-hmm. Now, if you saw your friend take his hand and swipe it across the table and knock it across, you'd say, well, he swiped it across the table and it flew across the room. Well, this is what David Chandler saw, is he sees something shooting out to the side as the building's falling, and it's not falling a regular gravitational fall, okay? It's shooting out with energy that's propelling it. So that's what caught his attention initially. Naturally,
and so that's amazing. And we've had Wayne Cost here, and we've had David Schlesinger and others, others that we're going to have and all that. And it's amazing how everyone has a different story, as everyone responds differently to the information that's being put out. So, and for myself, I know you've talked about yourself. For me, it was just watching a video that kind of brought it all together. I watched Loose Change and just immediately started my research from there. So one of the things I want to just kind of quickly throw in before we get into any new issues this week, we have a little quick, just a disclaimer. The opinions expressed on the show do not necessarily express the direct opinions of architects and engineers. We do point to them. We support architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, but all the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily represent the opinions of architects and engineers, and we just want to put that out there. And that, of course, regarding things that are said that are more our perceptions, of course. The science is the very same science that we're all talking about. So, all right, well, and we've done, so we kind of recapped it last week. I guess I have a question of the week, and now I've been doing this every week, and some of the questions, sometimes we resorted to the frequently asked questions of the Architects and Engineers website. This week, I'm just going to throw out one of those other questions, which have more than just scientific meaning. It's just kind of more deeper questions, just for people to think about it. And that is this week's question: given what we know about history and of governments, should any government be allowed to be involved in any scientific process or any scientific claim? There you go. I'll repeat that again. Given what we know about the history of governments, should the U.S. government, or any government, of course, be allowed to be involved in any scientific process or claim? Because if you're going to say yes, you'll have to explain that. If you're going to say no, you also have to explain that. I can give my answer. I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to throw out my answer, Andy. And my answer is no. Government should not be involved in the scientific process. And one of the reasons that we're going to talk about this, hopefully, at the end of this show, before we run out of time, and hopefully we'll make some time and talk about scientific dictatorship. And we'll hopefully be able to play some audio tapes from Dwight Eisenhower and some other audio tapes we have stored for today.
Certainly, and and I don't. Obviously, the audience needs to come up with its own answers. I can just give my own response. I mean, and my response is this: it certainly isn't allowed to own science. It certainly isn't allowed to change science based on its own agenda, as we had in the case of 9/11. And it certainly shouldn't be able to withhold its data, citing some unexplained public safety issue, from the independent scientists that want to do their own calculations. Mm-hmm. Science should available to all, and they don't just. Especially since it's the government, and it's our government, allegedly, of the people. We own that data. We have a right to our own analysis, to have that data. Yeah, and we talked about last week a little bit about how the science is under attack. I use words like junk science and computer model science, and that is one of the messages that we have for this week, and we want to pick up from there. The science is under attack,
And once you can compromise the science, people, that opens up the gates for a lot of bad things. Historically, we're going to be playing a clip warning from President Dwight Eisenhower back in 1961 and his final farewell address to the nation, and he felt it important to bring up the issue of the science. It's a big issue. We've heard Barack Obama talk about the science in a context that we only could wish he was observing, but that's another issue for another time.
Exactly. Oh, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to bring to the audience's attention, and obviously I would bet probably 99% of the audience listening right now has heard of the book 1984. And in it, they make a big point of saying 2 + 2 = 5. And the meaning behind that is that once a government is in complete control, they can change what is truth, what is just scientific mathematical truth. Obviously, you and I know that 2 + 2 = 4, but if since they're in such complete control in that novel, they can quote unquote, change reality. They can change that, and so they make a point of making the main character say, 2 + 2 = 5. Well, that's related to what we're talking about now. They can change Newton's laws because they allegedly are in control. But we're challenging that, and we're challenging that with reality.
That's an excellent point, Andy. I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that is, as you just said, one of the purposes of the show, and certainly one of the big topics for today, the science under attack. So one thing I wanted to share with everybody, we've talked about Newton's laws, and we've talked about the Piledriver Theory, and we've exposed NIST, and a few weeks ago we were rambling about the National Construction Safety Team Act introduced back in 2002, which, in case for those that weren't tuned in, this is an act that was brought in and signed into law by Congress back in 2002 that essentially gave National Institute of Standards and Technology, or the organization we refer to as NIST, it gave them the power to conceal all their test results, their experiments, just everything. And it essentially cleared the way for them to make computer model and computer simulated claims and then just basically attack anyone who doesn't agree with their computer simulations. That's what we're dealing with here. And that's why we brought up the issue of the National Construction Safety Team Act, which basically it gave NIST that power to conceal their experiment results if they felt that anything being revealed to the general public through a Freedom of Information Act could be deemed a national security safety issue. It's just that simple. That's how things work. And with that simple stroke of a pen, they gave themselves the power to conceal scientific results. We will never do that here in the Truth Movement of 9/11. Everything is transparent, and a lot of people know that. David Chandler certainly knows that. That's why we brought him on. Someone else knows that, and his name is John Cole, and among many, many other researchers for 9/11 Truth. So this week, it caught my attention. Someone out there to highlight what we've been talking about in terms of scientific dictatorship and filling in the blank that 2 + 2 = 5. Someone out there believes that 2 + 2 = 5 and that 1 + 1 = 3. And this person decided to email the organization regarding Jonathan Cole's, what I consider one of my favorite videos of all time. It's called Newton versus NIST. And that, again, can be found at Jonathan Cole's channel, the Physics and Reason YouTube channel, and look for a video that says Newton versus NIST. And it clearly explains everything in terms of Newton's laws, and he makes, better than just him talking, he actually shows you the experiments, and it's reproducible and easy to understand. But that didn't stop this individual from sending architects and engineers a very long email trying to attack all of the experiments and just basically Newton's laws. And I want to highlight a few of his points here to maybe the audience will be able to reflect, and maybe they can identify with some of these claims, and I'll do the best I can to essentially expose where the mistake is going on. Obviously his claims are a lot too long for me to go through all of them. So I'm just going to go over the first few. that this person wrote to the writing team, and this person, I'm not going to read everything, but he's essentially attacking Jonathan Cole, claiming that he's got everything wrong, and in his first point, he says that David Chandler is claiming that buildings fell faster than gravity. That's not true. That's not at all. We had him here last week. That's not the point. It's not that the buildings fell faster than gravity at all. So, and again, I'm just going to make these examples and then kind of make a comment about why people think this way, the way this individual thinks. In his second point, he's referring to that the towers were. He's basically saying all of it is possible, meaning the Piledriver theory, because the towers are, as he considers it, a quote hollow structure. So in the computer simulations, they've convinced the audience that the World Trade Center towers are basically we're not even going to count Building 7 because they had no explanation for that, and they still really don't. So we're just going to talk about the North and South Towers. They're referring to these towers as nothing more than hollow structures. And again, anybody who thinks a state-of-the-art structured building with 90,000 plus tons of structural steel is a hollow structure, we'll kind of move on to the next one. And then he goes on his third point. He's saying that, let me see if I can read. It says, he basically trying to address the experiments, saying that a structure is, well, I'll read it. It says, comparing your weight in an elevator to a gravity would somehow lessen the force of pure stupidity. He goes on to talk about how a person inside an elevator will not experience any velocity changes and this and that. And basically what he's saying, he ends up his point in number 3 by saying that only the upper portion was moving. The force would be increasing, he says. Again, and we talked about the Piledriver theory. In the theory, the claim is that the top portion of the building somehow became heavier and heavier and heavier with the recruitment of gravity and therefore acted as a hammer. So he is essentially completely ignoring the resistance from the lower floors. And then kind of wrapping up a couple of these other ones, his fourth point, he goes on to saying, Newton's first law entirely states an object in motion tends to stay in motion and objects at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted on by an external force. So then he says, he's attributing that external force to be gravity. He says, so Cole, are you either denying that gravity is an external force? And he's asking that with confidence. So let us answer that for this gentleman. No, it is not the force that is required to break through the lower solid structures. So again, in this Piledriver theory, the audience is lured into believing that the top mass was there, and I believe I offered cash, right, a few weeks ago for anyone who could find this top mass that's pile driving its way through the bottom. That video doesn't exist. No one's ever seen this top mass. But let's say it was there. The Piledriver theory claims that this top mass, because it weighs so much, was able to recruit more and more mass and break its way through the exponentially stronger resistance at the bottom. They ignore the third Newton's law that says for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. In other words, they bypass the resistance being provided by the lower floors. How they do that? You can easily do that if you have computer model simulations. So, and then kind of on point number 5, the person says he's bad-mouthing, let me see which parts. Again, his point is that the tower is collapsing into itself. The mass is, and he writes in capital letters, increasing, thus the acceleration will also. So again and again and again, and I'll tie that into the last point, and that is the number 6 that he makes, and that is Newton's third law states yet again that there would be more force, more, he emphasizes, not less. For every action there is an equal and opposite. He ties that first sentence with the third law of Newton. Well, Newton's third law states that for every action there is equal and opposite reaction. It does not state that when one thing runs into another, one of them is going to outdo the other in a boxing match and become bigger as it moves. So as a result of gravity. So anyway, I'm done with that. My point in all of this is this person is claiming that Newton's law supports that an object that is falling on an object that's even exponentially bigger than it is, or a lot bigger and a lot sturdier and stronger, the little object will win. And it's basically like equating one little sports car running into a truck and saying that the little sports car is going to win because it's going to recruit parts of the truck to destroy the truck. That's basically the way I put it. You know, if a little car runs into a Mack truck and they're running right into each other, if someone thinks that the little car is going to win because as it impacts the bigger truck, it's recruiting parts of the front of the truck and recruiting it for its side in order to defeat the truck. Well, I think that's pretty much that only happens in computer model simulations and maybe in cartoons like Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner.
Well, we should call it the Looney Tunes science then.
And again, Andy, this is incredible. We'll go over it again. They're saying that the top mass hit the bottom mass, the lower 60, 70, or 80 such floors. The top 15 floors hit the lower, much bigger floors and just sequentially ignores Newton's laws, which states that the impact you could only deliver enough energy equivalent to that top mass, that initial top mass. The top mass doesn't break out a magic wand and suddenly recruit portions of the building onto its side of the argument and outdo the little part. I look at it also like this, Andy. It's like a boxing match. At one end of the corner, you have the 15-story building, 15 chunk of building, or that smaller section of the top, and the other end of the corner is the bigger, more longer, much heavier, and much more reinforced lower section. And they're trying to convince us that the little guy is going to win because he's going to be able to recruit parts of the other guy. And that's not science. People, here's one thing that we want. I pointed this email out only because let's go back to what we're saying. We're talking about the scientific dictatorship, and that's a great example of taking over the science. The individual is screaming and talking how his way is right because the NIST computer models say so. And that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Well, and again, we talked about this a few weeks ago. It doesn't account for the top totally disappearing somewhere in that journey from the very top of the World Trade Center to the ground. You know, it's recruiting, but if it's recruiting, what are the parts that are being recruited joining on to, because it disappears before it hits the ground, and you offered that cash reward for anybody that could show you a pile driver, you know, the piece that actually did the pile driving sitting on top of the rubble. It's not there. Okay, so this is like the sports car just totals the semi and disappears in the process of doing it. You know, this is what Wayne talked about with that cartoon, Somewhere a Miracle Happens. Where is the pile driver? You know, and that, I mean, you know, the whole argument can be debunked by that simple question, but we can ignore that obvious glaring omission, and you can get into it further, but really that's at the center of a lot of this.
Unbelievable. So, and with that example, this is an email that came to architects and engineers just in the last 24 or so hours. And, you know, one could speculate whether this person is just, well, you know, I think about what David Chandler, Professor Chandler was talking about last week, and I don't remember if he just kind of said this to us off the air. I believe he talked about at one point how he has worked as a professor in math and physics, and his job is to, when he administers a test to his class, a physics test, it is his job to kind of get inside the mind of that student and to kind of distinguish and outline and characterize why the student got the answer wrong as he's grading the exam himself. And it is his job to kind of get into their minds and see where they're getting it wrong and what they're doing to convince themselves that this is the wrong answer is the right answer in their minds. And that analysis is what he's so good at. So we couldn't have had anybody better at on the show last week, just talking about this kind of stuff. And the answers and the email provided by this person reminds me of that effort that David Chandler was talking about, how you can see in the person's explanations that he has no idea of what Newton's laws is. We have a real big problem when you have Americans and people in the world, mostly Americans, but people everywhere, who tend to believe this kind of computer model government science because they don't want to deal with being characterized as a conspiracy theorist or maybe being outcast in a social kind of way by their friends and family. Maybe they're just afraid to think on their own. So this is science that we're talking about, and we want our audience to feel comfortable and realize that when it comes to Newton's laws and these, it's kind of like there is no debate on whether 1 + 1 = 2. There are certain things that are not even debatable, and if someone is going to debate it, they're going to have to provide solid, reproducible evidence. So John Cole does that in his channels. He provides reproducible evidence and proof that the weight of an object will weigh less if it were moving than if it were standing still. Yet this person attacks John Cole with just pointing to the computer model simulations. And this is what scientific dictatorship is. When someone can reproduce something over and over again, as you're supposed to, according to the scientific method, you're supposed to be able to show your proof. And if showing your proof over and over again is still not enough, people get angry, and they're going to email someone like John Cole and get angry because what he's saying is not consistent with the computer model simulation. So that's what it's all about. That's what we're trying to expose, Andy.
Well, yeah, and I just want to add another point about this, too. I mean, even if you're somebody that's listening to this and doesn't want to immediately subscribe to what we're saying because of its implications, and you want to research it even further, what's important, we talk about the science being under attack, is that, science can only thrive in an environment where people are free to ask questions. And Jesse Ventura has addressed this. Now, people get hung up on the fact that he was a wrestler at one point, but he was also a governor, and he was also an underwater demolitions expert for the Marines. And something he always says is that, there's no stupid questions. All right, there are no stupid questions. I've been a teacher myself. And this is the point I've always stressed with kids, is that, if you don't understand something, ask. Don't be afraid to do that. And I always taught the other kids, respect somebody when they ask questions, because you may get it, but this person, may not be getting it as quick, and there are things that you're not going to get that he's going to get even quicker than you. But what we noticed after 9/11 is that anybody who asked reasonable questions, and I use the example again of Stephen Jones proposing a hypothesis, which is part of the scientific method. Anybody who would ask reasonable questions, not even blaming, not blaming the government, not blaming any particular party about why this happened, would be jumped on. Would be questioned, do you hate America? Are you with Al Qaeda? Are you some America-hating communist? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that they've had to deal with. So what immediately happened is the discussion went from simple inquiry to this heated war, information war of words, and it took it to a level where where it did make people like me start. This is me saying it to the government and to the media mouthpieces. Well, you are acting like you have something to hide, and making me look into it even more. Even if you're still skeptical, even if you're kind of approaching this scientifically, which we're asking you to do, what we're saying is important because it's important for the scientific discussion of this event. It's important, when you have one side that's hiding its data and personally attacking folks that ask reasonable questions, and then you have the other side that is asking people to challenge us, to offering cash rewards if you can find a certain thing. You need to get this out there, and you need to basically understand what's happening, scientific discussion in America.
Absolutely. And someone else agrees with you, and he's not with us anymore, but we're going to go fast rewind to 1961. President Dwight Eisenhower, let's hear what he had to say about scientific takeover by the government. Let's listen in.
Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. It is the task of statesmanship to mold, to balance, and to integrate these and other forces, new and old, within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society.
And here I would like briefly to compare the parable of Brave New World with another parable which was put forth more recently in George Orwell's book 1984. I'm inclined to think that the scientific dictatorships of the future, and I think there are going to be scientific dictatorships in many parts of the world, will be probably a good deal nearer to the Brave New World pattern than to the 1984 pattern. They will be a good deal nearer, not because of any humanitarian qualms in the scientific dictators, but simply because the Brave New World pattern is probably a good deal more efficient than the other. But if you can get people to consent to the state of affairs in which they are living, the state of servitude, the state of being, well, it seems to me that the nature of the ultimate revolution with which we are now faced is precisely this, that we are in process of developing a whole series of techniques which will enable the controlling oligarchy, who have always existed and presumably always will exist, to get people actually to love their servitude. People can be made to enjoy a state of affairs which, by any decent standard, they ought not to enjoy. And these methods, I think, are a real refinement on the older methods of terror, because they combine methods of terror with methods of acceptance.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Straight from the mouth of President Dwight Eisenhower, and that second clip there, that soundbite, was Aldous Huxley, the writer and author of Brave New World, back in 1962, talking about the scientific dictatorship and what he foresaw coming. So, just a very powerful audio from those two pieces there, and the importance, and that's the reason earlier we brought up the email from that person, because it really, really brought home that point in my mind, the danger that we face now when you have the just average Americans sworn to and just comfortable in computer simulated science created by a government. And that's going to go back to my point from a few weeks ago about the disconnect. Americans everywhere, whoever you are, whether you're a Christian, Muslim, or whether you're a believer, non-believer, maybe you're not religious, regardless of who you are, maybe you simply love your country, maybe you just love humanity and you want to be a good person, people have to understand what the dangers are and read history, where we are. People should develop a sense of history of where we are in history, and that's something that the mainstream media and entertainment, Andy, doesn't want people to think about. They want people to just simply keep playing around video games and TV shows, entertainment, sports, movies, you name it.
Well, you're right about that. There's so much contained in those clips. We can't get into it. Probably, the full discussion it deserves in this hour. But it's something to keep in mind, and probably what's holding back this truth from breaking into the accepted fact is the fact that, in 9/11 truth, the scientific truth, superficially, and again, there's many tiers to this discussion, but superficially, nobody has anything to gain from it. Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex taking root in America and taking hold of our government policies. The truth about what actually brought down the towers and the implications that come with that, nobody stands to gain from that. No American wants to think about those implications. Certainly, members of our government don't have anything to gain. Certainly, industry doesn't have anything to gain from the wars that they're profiting off of after this event happens, and the security industrial complex that we have now has nothing to gain off of that. So this is what's holding it back superficially. So, what does coming on the radio and talking about 9/11 truth have to gain for anybody? What does it have to gain for the average American to acknowledge this? Well, what I say is that, it gains the peace of mind. I talked about secrets a few weeks ago, and how people are more tense when there's a secret that they're keeping, how they make more mistakes, about how life is just not as enjoyable, is not as much worth living if you're holding on to a secret. It's better to just have it out, to expose it for yourself and live with it and deal with it afterwards. Take whatever comes with it. There's an expression, I don't know who even said it, but let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. And I hear people quote this all the time. Well, this is the case with 9/11 truth. Now, going into the Aldous Huxley clip about, at some point people may come to love their servitude. I saw an article in some mainstream magazine, might have been Time or something like that, about how our brains are being rewired, how we're living through our computers now more than ever. And this is something that I think the mainstream is trying to establish, because it makes things like the NIST computer models more believable. We're tuning out and playing video games where we can be another person, we can fly across landscapes, and on superficially it seems like a more enjoyable world as things happen to us in the real world. We can maintain a make-believe farm in some other universe, and we think that we're actually becoming rich off of this. A piece of our mind thinks that, and it's an escape. Well, in a lot of ways too, the NIST computer models are an escape. They're an escape from reality, from the grim reality that we're bringing to you on this show, and so they can just say, well, this is how it happened, and people can turn their brains off and not have to deal with this. That's an escape too, just like the video games, just like the social networking that's making us actually farther apart from each other as humans, not talking to each other. I remember a day when you actually had to go talk to somebody or pick up a phone, at least to call them, to chat with them, and now people are interacting through short, choppy sentences on Facebook. All right, we're being changed. Our brains are being changed, and reality is being changed for us through the computers that's being used to distract us.
Wow, I couldn't have said it any better. You're so right about that. We're just simply being dehumanized in a more and some people out there. I'm not going to throw any stones at any particular groups, but there are a lot of people out there that attribute this to the notion of that we're evolving. We are becoming, we're evolving as human beings. But it's one thing, and people, and that opens up a whole nother conversation. People talk about consciousness and evolving, and it seems to be like the military-industrial complex. And we just played Dwight Eisenhower. A lot of corporations, a lot of private interests, or a lot of self-help organizations out there now, a lot of programs, all under the guise of making you feel better, making you healthier, you're evolving, this and that. And a lot of it is focused on the same old greed for money me disconnect with the human spirit and just kind of disconnecting from that human element. So I definitely observed that you bring up, and that's so true. I've had associates, friends who they don't, they know that I pursue this. I pursue not only 9/11 truth, but just the bigger picture. And a lot of them, after a while, they don't want to hear about it because it interferes with their positive. They feel that it interferes with, what they're pursuing, which is they perceive it to be more positive. Well, I want to let everyone know right now that once you understand the truth really will set you free. Once you understand what's happening, it's kind of dark and gloomy, a lot of the things that we talk about, but that is not a reason to be dark and gloomy and to feel that way, because I believe that the truth does set you free, and it's one thing to have knowledge and courage to move forward and to know and see what's going on around you. It's another thing to stick your head in the sand and feel better about life. Some people want to, I've got all kinds of friends and different people that have tried to convince me into taking a certain medication, a certain foods, staring at the sun, and all kinds of meditative and all these kinds of things. And I tell them, it's okay again, but not at the expense of the truth and what's happening. We have an obligation to be active and to be out there fighting for humanity, and that's the battle that we're in. It's an information war, people. We talk about science, we talk about reproducible experiments, and all these kinds of things, and we tie it into humanity, the future of humanity. We're talking about where humanity is going, as you're pointing out, Andy, that people just want something that makes them feel better, and that is one of our problems right now. We're in a society that just wants to feel better, and I know you know as well, Andy, that Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers, occasionally does go out and the organization sets up so-called debates with individuals like Dave Thomas from New Mexico Science and Region, and there's all these other individuals that are out there. Now, what the issue is, and we've talked about it, and you just hit on it, is that the audience listens in, and all along, even though what Dave Thomas may be talking about is pure computer model science, Piledriver Theory that we've been exposing for weeks now, it doesn't matter to the audience. What he's saying feels better. It's almost like saying basically the lies of 9/11 feel better, because it kind of preserves the current paradigm that you have now, and accepting 9/11 truth breaks the current paradigm that you're in now, and it forces you to rethink things, and not everyone wants to do that.
Well, you're right about that. We do this. We do this every week, and we do this activism. I've been doing this for years, and the reason is because 9/11 science truth is not just about avenging the deaths that happened on that day and getting justice for the victims. It's about that, but there's also a bigger picture in this spectrum as well. And I talked earlier about the book 1984 and how at the end of it they torture the main character for daring to stand out against the government in that fictional world, and they get a surrender from him. They get him to write down or say that 2 + 2 = 5, and in that sense they get to control reality. They get to change what is mathematical truth. And you talk about how they're creating these programs where people can create live in fake worlds, and they can change reality. People can fly, and it's wonderful, it's exciting, it's fun, but who benefits from that? The people who create the reality. What do they become? What do they become a pseudo version of? Okay, they become like the new creators of their own world. Now, you and I know that they're just programming a computer, but these people get to assume a new role of just overseer of humanity, and those are very big, bold terms, but that's really what they are. And so it's a bigger fight because 9/11 truth, lets them say, no, you don't own everything. You aren't the creator of the universe. There's certain laws in the universe that were laid down long before you ever existed, and you are not the overseer of that.
Absolutely.
Okay? And so that is what we're essentially doing, is we're reclaiming science, and we're telling these people, no, you don't get to make your own laws. You don't get to defy Newton's laws, because those are universal.
Absolutely. And that opens up another topic, which we won't really go into, but I want to remind people that when the Founding Fathers when the intention behind the United States and America, essentially, and the Republic is always the structure. It was intended from the beginning to be God, then the individual, and then the country third, government third, and the principles of what the United States is based on and founded on is on that there is a God or whoever God is to you. There's a supreme being or a higher power, a sovereignty that exists that comes, a sovereignty that every person has based on that there's one other power that's much bigger than any government out there, whether it's the order of nature, whether it's God. Everyone has a different explanation of what God is to them. We respect that, and that's what we're fighting for. God, then the individual, and then a distant third place is government, and it is up to the people to decide whether a government has gone rogue, and that's the way it was meant to be. But the direction that we're going on, the government comes first, above any form of God or religion or any higher power. The government comes first. That's what we're walking into now. By definition, that is fascism. But we want to steer away from that, where there is a higher power. There are rules to the universe. You can't just take over those rules, take over the science. And we're not saying that science is God. We're just saying that there are rules of the universe, and there are things that stand on their own without anybody intervening. And thankfully, in terms of the science that we'd like to focus on, there are methods and techniques that we can verify this truth, this truism, or this evidence. And that's what we do. That's what we focus on. And that's what we're fighting against right now. So
you're right. And, there were rules set down that man had to live by something other than man, and man can't just change that because there's a political agenda attached to it or because it feels good.
Absolutely. So it sounds like, Andy, that we have about run out of time. We had a lot of other things on the agenda. We'll pick this up next week. We're going to play some audio tapes from a bunch of, we're going to go back to the eyewitness testimonies from quite a few individuals who heard and saw explosions. So one massive explosion after another, and we're going to tap into some of the work. Hopefully we'll get some time next week to talk about that and play some audios from Professor Graham McQueen. We'll keep the ball rolling here at 9/11 Freefall, so plenty of material to cover. So all right, well, that's how we do it, Andy, and we want to thank everybody, our audience, for tuning in to 9/11 Freefall, courtesy WWCR. And until next time, again, it's Bernie Suarez and Andy Steele saying goodbye, everybody. Take care and have a great night.